Hello everybody and welcome or welcome back to the second shelf and to another recent reads on Sunday on this 1st of October. Can you believe it? We are entering Victober, but more about that towards the end of the video because I'm going to start my first Victober read today, of course. But first, the books that I've finished, and I'm obviously, as you can tell, finally feeling better, so I'm reading more. So I finished 3 books that I want to talk to you about. The first one was a buddy read with Chris, one half of the Book Cougars, and we read Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma by Claire Dederer together. This book was published earlier this year, I think in March. And it is about monsters. So monstrous artists who did something in their personal life that is abominable, like, rape or child abuse or you name it. And Claire Dederer in this book wants to explore how to deal with that. She is focusing on more or less contemporary artists. I mean, some of them dead, like Hemingway, for instance, but she's not looking at Homer, for instance. First of all, we don't know anything about his life, if he ever existed, but she is, looking at contemporary 20th century artists, and she explores various ways, so to speak, that you can be a monster. And of course, the obvious choices, and by the way, it's not about books in particular, but art in general. So whether it's movies, she's talking about Woody Allen, Roman Polanski, or books, Hemingway, or paintings, or music. So it's broad. And then she, like I said, looks at various ways that the artist could be considered quote-unquote monstrous. And it's female and male artists, by the way, so it's not a look at male monsters, but it's females as well. And her premise question is, how do we deal with that? Can we still watch a movie by somebody who raped a 13-year-old girl? The first part of the book was good, not excellent, but good. The first 5 chapters or something. She asked the right questions. She asked important questions, but already in the beginning, you could see that her argumentation wasn't really going very deep, was sometimes sloppy. She did not explore the context, like our patriarchal structure is that an important issue, especially when it comes to male monsters? She explored the male genius, for instance, who would claim that because he is a genius, he can also treat people like shit because that's what his art requires. So it's the first part is good, not excellent, but good. And then it goes really, for me, at least, it went downhill from there. And I think for Chris as well, but she will do her own review. The book then was all over the place, exploring also whether Claire Dederer herself was a monster, not making clear why really she would consider herself a monster. And then in the end, it was all about love, and you can't help what you love. So if you love that movie made by that guy who raped a 13-year-old girl, and that was like, meh. Not really. It was rather anti-feminist, I would say. Also, the way she, for instance, talks about Jodi Mitchell, who gave up her child for adoption, and that made her monstrous. Not giving any context in terms of why does a woman have a choice. It was. In the end, I felt it was a disappointment. Certainly the second half of the book. I mean, if you want to have a look, I would say the first 5 chapters are still worth your time. And that's about half of the book. But the rest, no, did not really work for me. I thought it was not thought through. It was sloppy in terms of the thinking, and it was, for me, way too anti-feminist. So kind of a mixed bag, like, you know, a 2.5 in Goodreads terms. Much better was the next book that I already talked about because I hauled it in my last video, my book haul, and that was also nonfiction, Catherine McCormick, Women in the Picture, Women, Art, and the Power of Looking. I read this book on script, on audio, and I thought it was so good that I wanted to have my own copy, and that's why I bought this paperback copy. Catherine McCormick explores, I think it's 4 parts. Like on the cover, it's a painting of Venus. She mainly explores, obviously, paintings of women, mainly painted by men, and how that can tell us something of how women were perceived, and she explores that in the 4 parts, like I said, starting with Venus, I think, yes. So the woman as Venus, you know, the goddess of love, and then mothers, and then maidens, and then monstrous women. And this book I felt was excellent. It had everything that the previous book didn't have. Really deep, in-depth explorations, fascinating arguments, a real in-depth knowledge of art. The author is, I think, an art historian. Yes, art historian. And that shows. But in the book itself, you have pictures, but she also describes the artwork, and in a way, her trained eye, she is trained to look at pictures. Though, if you are interested at all in a combination of feminism, art, looking at women, I can highly, highly recommend this one. It's not for everyone. Like I said, if you're not into art and into painting and paintings in particular, this book will bore you. But if art is something that really interests you and you want to have a feminist look at the paintings that depict women, pick up that book. The third book I want to talk to you about is fiction, translated work, Wound by Oksana Vasiakina. Vasiakina. Sorry about that. Translated from the Russian by Elina Alter. Now let me check whether I at least get that right. Yes, Elina Alter. Also a new release from March or April 2023. No. Even later, in the summer. And the Russian original in 2021. Now, Oksana Vasiakina is a really well-known contemporary Russian poet and a novelist. And it was my first encounter with her. I don't think many of her work has been translated into English. More of it has been translated into German, by the way. So if you read German and are interested in more than this particular book, you can check out the German translation. In this book, it is highly autobiographical, talking about the death of Vasiakina's mother, who died of breast cancer when she was just recently, in the book recently, and also quite young, in her 50s. And Vasiakina's way of dealing with the grief, but also taking her mother's ashes back to where her mother came from in Siberia in order to bury or spread her ashes there. So it's kind of a combination of a grief memoir in fiction form, so to speak, and a road trip book bringing her mother back home. And like with the first book I talked about in this video, the first part was excellent. The death of her mother, how she talks about her mother's life, her illness, her death. You also get some insight into Russia, modern day Russia. Her mother was a factory worker. Her mother's relationships, the various men she was with, including Vasyakina's father. And then in the second part, it was like as if I switched to a different book. We had extensive poetry. It got more and more like a memoir. It completely, for me at least, completely lost focus. It picked up the original idea of the book in the last maybe 20, 25 pages. But it was a really weird reading experience. It was like a Bohemian Rhapsody kind of a book. And so it only worked for me partly, but I still felt that she is a really interesting writer, Vasyakina, and I want to, look at more of her work. But this one was a kind of a, not quite, unfortunately. And then the books I'm still reading, I'm still working my way through my pick, Christine de Pizan, the Book of the City of Ladies, my pick for the 12 classics I want to read in 2023. It was the September pick, but because of my travel and then 2 weeks of having the flu, I just didn't make it. And I will postpone the check-in with this book until the end of October, because it's not that short and it's dense, and I'm just not, I couldn't make it this week. So I will take my time, which also means that I will probably read, either will cut down from the 12 to 11, or I will read 2 books in December. We'll see how it goes. But this is a how do you say that? Medieval, that was it. Medieval book, published originally in 1200 and something. 1405. And by the way, it was translated from the French by Rosalind Brown Grant. And Christine de Pizan was the first known women of letters in France, and she explores the idea of a female city after she read quite some sexist and misogynistic books by men talking about women in a really negative way, and this is her answer. But I'm only 20 pages or 25 pages in. So if you are reading along, we will check in end of October. And there will be no other pick of the classics for the month of October. Then I picked up another new release that had quite the hype, and that is Rebecca F. Kuang's book Yellowface. Rebecca F. Kuang is a Chinese-American author. She was born in China but immigrated with her parents to the US when she was 4 years old. She's now 27. And she is most well known for her Poppy War series, a fantasy series that I haven't read. I have read Babel, her standalone book, also fantasy, set in an alternate London, 19th century London, with this school for translation. And there's magic going on, which did not work for me. But I thought this one, I want to give it a try because the premise interests me. It's about the publishing industry. It's about an author taking the work of a Chinese-American author, a white author taking the work of a Chinese-American author and presenting it as her own. So that premise I thought was interesting. I don't think this will be a favorite read. I can tell you that already. My issue with Kwang is that, I mean, I've only had Babel and this part of this one, that she has really good ideas. I thought Babel, the premise was excellent, and this premise also, but plot and pacing, not her strong points. And obviously the editors don't care, which I think is not good for a very young author. But we'll see how this ends. But so far, it's like a premise very good, interesting ideas, but the plot and the pacing, especially in the middle, all over the place. We'll see how it ends. And then Victober. Yes, it's the 1st of October, so Victober has officially started, and I picked my first book to read, and that is, John Halifax, Gentleman by Dina Maria Mulloch Craig. And this is a book published in 1856. It's my second Dina Maria Mulloch. I read Noble Life in the previous Victober last year, and this one is about John Halifax, who was born poor, an orphan, then taken in by a family and making a fortune. So I'm reading this for the prompt, a novel told in the first person, because this book is told by John Halifax's friend, the son of the family that took him in. I'm really looking forward. I picked the biggest one, of course, to start with, so that I have enough time and don't have to stress and fret that I will finish it. But I'm very excited to start my Victober reads. So these were the books that I finished, still working on, and I'm about to start once the video is finished. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, very much looking forward to your comments, and I'll talk to you all soon in the next one.